I'm joined today by Ryan. Hello, Ryan.
Hi, Andy.
So let's just start with what you're doing. So you're in an office, so that does sort of put you in a certain thing. So we're assuming you're not a rugby coach. We think we can go away from that probably. But just tell us a bit. What's the organisation you're working for?
So I'm the manager of Homes of Hope. It's a supported housing charity. We are sort of like a middle ground, if you like. So we're not a rehabilitation. We're a Christian organisation, unashamedly Christians. But we sit in the middle in terms of we take people that are coming out of rehabilitation, people that are coming out of prison, people that have been sofa surfing. We sort of tackle the hidden homeless stuff and prevention of that as well. So we would give somebody 2 years on a license agreement, and in that 2 years, we help to build them up, find them employment, but also help them to become a stand-up member of society and help them in that direction.
I guess it's very easy to think, okay, just taking the idea of somebody who's homeless, oh well, they've done it to themselves, it's their own fault, well, it's their problem. And as soon as we say any of those things, we're immediately putting all this weight of stuff on. We have no clue. I remember one time I was walking through Shrewsbury City Centre, and there was a guy on a bit of cardboard asking for food, and I went down and had a chat with him, and I had my kids, we gave him some little Scotch pancakes, so we're having a chat, and I said, do you not find that you can go to the local homeless centre run by the church, which was really, really good? He says, oh, I can't go there. I said, well, are they throwing you out? No, it's nothing like that. Well, what's the problem? He says, well, I was the manager there. And then I got into homelessness and I just sort of fell out and back into old ways. And so he couldn't access that. And this is a guy who used to run for churches, the local homeless kind of drop. It wasn't actually an overnight thing, but it was like showers and food and all that. And he said, well, I can't go back now because, I was there and now I'm here. And it's so complicated. And there is no like one size fits all solution, is there?
No, but there's many layers. So I used to work for Manchester City Mission. I worked there for 3 years. That was where I first started in ministry full time. And while I was there, the project that I helped to lead was called Operation Joy, and it was a homeless outreach project. And literally, I started by going out with these bags of hope, giving the homeless uh, food and socks and hats and toothpaste and all this. And I really felt like that wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. These guys needed more relational stuff. So I changed things up and I started just building relationships with homeless people. And when I sat with these guys, these people have got real stories and real tragedies that have just unfortunate circumstances have happened to them and have led them to this homeless situation. But once they've got into that, they're finding it so hard to get out of it because it becomes like a community. They're surviving together. There's a hierarchy in there. They've got best friends. They've got people that are helping them out with stuff. And they feel like that they just can't get out of that. I call it a fog, so to speak.
Hmm.
I remember this lady that was on the streets of Manchester. She was a nurse and she was fleeing domestic violence. She went to the authorities. She was in a relationship with a guy, but he was the abuser. She went to the authorities and the services, and the services said to her, well, let's phone the police. Let's get the police involved. And she said, I don't want to because I'm scared. I don't want any of that drama happening with him. Just can you help me to find somewhere to live? And they said to her, well, you've intentionally made yourself homeless. So next thing she's on the streets. This woman's a professional nurse. And over a period of time, Andy, it was about 6 months, I saw her at a point of where she was like, she was just she'd just been homeless for a few weeks. And then about 6 months later, I saw it, and she had lost loads of weight. She had started taking drugs, just a real sorry state of affairs. So yeah, there's absolutely, it's a minefield. There's so many layers to this stuff.
I want to move on to other stuff, but the one thing that really struck me was I was stood in the bank one day trying to help one of my sons with their bank account, and there were problems with the post, and we just couldn't get it sorted. So we went into the branch, and while we're in there, there was a really, really angry guy. But the thing is, he was angry because one of his family members had sent him a check for some money. I was like 500 quid or something like that. It was quite a decent amount of money, and he was trying to put the check in the bank. Okay, well that's pretty normal, but he was homeless, so he didn't have an address, and he said, "Well, I've got £500. It's in here." And they said, "Yeah, the check is valid, but I just want the money." And the person behind them was trying to stay calm. This guy getting more and more upset and wound up, "But I need the money." And she said, "But you don't have a bank account." "Well, give me a bank account." "But you haven't got an address. We can't give you a bank account without an address." "But what do I do with the money?" And she said, "Well, can you not send it back and ask for the cash instead?" "But I don't know where they live. They've just sent me some money and it's for me." And this was just getting more and more agitated. And I'm almost in tears thinking this guy has got money that he can't even get hold of because it's in a check form. And how do you access that? Well, in the UK, you don't without a bank account. And you can't have a bank account without an address. And you can't have an address without a deposit, money, rent, and a job. So even I can see just the frustration upon this guy of I've actually got some money and I can't access it.
Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Terrible.
It's but that's the state we're in, right? So when people are
Yeah,
homeless, we'll get yourself out again.
yeah.
It's not that easy.
No, it's not. It's not. And these are real people. I think that, like you just said before, Andy, quite rightly as well, it's not one size fits all. It's we've really got to put time into these people to start to peel off these layers, so that they're able to really start to breathe again, to start to make proper choices. I'm always reminded of that Maslow's hierarchy. Take that homeless person out of the fog and give them their essential needs, like somewhere to live, somewhere where they've got heating, water, food. Now we can start looking at other stuff, other choices, things, building relationships, all that stuff. But while you're homeless, I think you are in a survival mode, of like, how am I going to eat today? Where am I going to sleep tonight? These things that, we take for granted, don't we, really? Yeah.
We really, really do. Let's go back in time a little bit for you then, in terms of life and faith, because you're working for, as you say, you are quite happily a Christian organization with the work that
Yeah.
you do, Manchester City Mission. So there's a lot of kind of Christian stuff in there. But what was your upbringing? Where did life, where did life begin for you, and where did faith start to fit into that?
Okay, so I was born into a loving family in 1979, a little village called Limeside in Oldham, which is a council estate. We never had much, but we always had enough. My mum would work long hours to make sure food was on the table. Um, yeah, just my dad left me when I was 7 years old. Never saw my dad after that. Really felt like there was a dysfunction because I was looking for leadership. I was looking for it in the wrong places. Got a job when I was 15 in a restaurant, quickly became the head chef, didn't know how to do relationships, started partying, because that was sort of the culture back then, started taking a lot of recreational drugs, met this girl, we fell in love at a young age, and we would be dysfunctional through the week, dysfunctional even on the weekends, really, if I think about it. So we would take drugs on the weekend, wouldn't know how to do life through the week, argue like cat and dog. And by the time I was 25, Andy, we had two children together. But I felt like we was going to kill each other if we didn't part. And we both decided that it was best for us and the kids that we split. So we split up for 10 years, I was thinking that she was the one with the issues, and she was thinking that I was the one with the issues. Really in denial or looking at ourselves, just pointing the fingers. And so for 10 years, Andy, I went through more bad relationships, toxic stuff, realizing that every relationship that I went into, it ended up just like the other one. Dysfunctional again, taking recreational drugs. I have always worked, but I sort of fashioned my drug taking. I used to take amphetamine, I would drink, I would sniff cocaine on the weekend, smoke weed, but I fashioned my drug taking around my work life and just so I would manage it, if you like. And by the time I was 35, I took a break from every relationship. I started to look at myself because I've started to see my children, no matter what was going on in my life, I'd always pick up my children from my ex-partners. And I started to see a change in them. I started to see this peace come on them. And they started to look to me for leadership. And that made me think, well, I need to change some stuff in my life. These kids are growing up now. They're looking for a role model. I was looking for a role model in all the wrong places and totally got it wrong trying to do life. And I remember picking them up one afternoon from my ex-partners, and I saw this change in her, and I really saw a change. It wasn't like she was living in a nice house or anything like that. I saw a change within her.
Mm.
She had gone from being a reckless young girl to a beautiful, selfless mother. And I said, what has changed? Because I'm even seeing this change in my children.
Mm.
And she said it was Jesus. And I rudely, because of my ignorance, told her where to go. She threatened to start praying for me. I said, don't you pray for me. I had this idea, and I think it's a misconception, because I said to her, I don't want my kids walking about the streets with rucksacks on, telling people about Jesus. And I walked away that day, and the coming weeks, my life was breaking down again. I'd had mortgages. I've been a manager of a pub. I even bought a franchise. I've been an asbestos manager. And all of a sudden now I've got 2 black bin liners with just closing. I've had mortgages on houses, and next thing I'm back at my brother's in his back bedroom. All the dumb decisions that I've made have led me back to this place. And I remember sitting on the bed and looking out the window and thinking, God, if you're real, have you got a plan for my life?
Mm.
And I started to look within myself and ask these questions, because I think that if we don't understand something, Andy, we push it to one side. There is a lot of ignorance in there. And with the church, I'd only ever been to church for funerals or maybe the odd wedding. My idea about church was a priest stood at the front and me not understanding what he's talking about. And I thought, I don't want my kids doing that stuff, because all I hear about the church is dramas on the news or, people telling stories. And so I'd become ignorant to it. But all of a sudden now I'm sat in my brother's back bedroom. Now I'm thinking to myself, could there be a God? So I went back to Kelkina and I just said, is this true? She started to tell me a story. And when somebody's telling you a story and it's, that it's real, you can't say this is not real. She said, Ryan, I was depressed. She said, I was literally going to end it all. She said, I was going to send the kids to live with you. I'm like, what? Me? Me who was doing my crazy stuff. She said, yeah, I was just going to send the kids to you. I was going to end it all. I've been depressed for about 3 months, not answering the door to people. Curtains were shut. And she got down on her knees and she called out to God. She said that she literally felt God's presence. She said that she felt this depression lift off her in that moment. And she went to bed that night thinking that, right, everything's going to be all right from this moment on. Well, she's telling me this story, Andy, and like, I'm crying, she's crying, And I'm like, wow, this God is not a religion, because I had this idea of God being a religion, but he actually cares about us. Next day, she said she opened up her curtains for the first time. This van pulled up. It said, "Make Jesus known" on the side. Uh, she told it advertised on the side, Andy, this app. It was called the iTruth app at the time, but it had testimonies from people like me, people like you, lawyers, plumbers, dentists, school teachers, ex-drug addicts, ex-drug dealers, gangsters. And so she told me to have a look at this iTruth app, and I'm looking at these testimonies. I'm thinking, wow, this God loves everybody. It started to build this spiritual hunger. And I went back to her. I said, what's next? She said, come to church. And like I've just said, I had this preconceived idea thinking,
Yep.
I'm not the church type. And she took me to this rundown bank on the edge of Oldham. And honestly, I walked in the place and there was a guy that I used to hang about with he was homeless when I used to hang about with him, but he was a bit of a villain. He's now an ordained leader in this little rundown bank on the edge of Oldham. I'm thinking, what on earth is going on in here? And I walked in that place and I saw that everybody was genuinely nice. And you've probably experienced this, but I find when I was in the world, Andy, there was a lot of people that if they was being nice, there was normally an hidden agenda in there.
Yeah.
These people was genuinely nice. I'm thinking, okay. Next thing, the service starts, music starts. I starts to cry, and I must have cried through the full service, but it wasn't tears of unhappiness. I was feeling like there was all this stuff that I'd crushed for all this time was coming out of me. And the guy who was now this ordained leader that I used to hang about with on the streets, he was preaching. He's talking about this time when he was on the bridge and he was going to take his life, and he literally heard God say, I love you, Lee. He's asking now, does anybody want to give their life to Christ? And something made me put my hand up in that moment. And to be honest, Andy, I've not looked back since I walked out of that church because my ex-partner had taken me to that church. All my addictions started to fall away one by one. I put the amphetamine down, I stopped the weed, the drinking went, the cigarettes went, and all of a sudden this love started to build. I was looking at my ex-partner in a way that I'd not looked at her in years. I started to desire this girl. Now we are married. Our family goes to church. Our kids go to church. My son did a gap year at the Message Evangelism College. Just, God is absolutely incredible. So that's, in a nutshell, that's where God really entered into my life. And he just started to unstitch all this stuff, this addiction, my unforgiveness, my love, my distorted way of loving somebody. And yeah, so I'm now married. We're happy. God's at the center of everything that we're doing, Andy.
But that last thing you just said, isn't that the key? Because all the stuff you tried to use, I guess, to get through life is my really, really generally, it's like a stereotypical thing, but all the stuff that we do, the drinking, the partying, whatever, it's usually because we're trying to fill a void. We're trying to find some, I suppose, acceptance of who we are. So we find people who are sort of in the same kind of, wanting the same sort of stuff, which is we're not really coping with life because there's this void. There's a band called Plum. Brilliant song. There's a God-shaped hole in every single one of us, or each one of us. Yeah. And I just think that is so key. But I love how God was weaving it. But I just love that you had this vision of what a relationship with Jesus was, and your vision of what a relationship with Jesus was more about religion, not understanding, being in a church building, telling people about Jesus, but not really having any connection. And yet what changed for you was an actual connection with your now wife, who actually encountered Jesus in a very, very dark moment. But in that dark moment, she reached out and Jesus said, yep, I'm here.
I'm here. Yeah. Amen to that.
Beautiful.
Absolutely beautiful.
I'm crying now as well, which doesn't take much, but hey,
Oh,
but it's
come on,
powerful.
brother.
It's good because
It
it's
is.
redemption.
Oh,
It's yeah, I mean all the stuff you've been through, it's really hard stuff. And thank you for, sharing that stuff. And I'm hoping that people will listen to this and think, well, I've got this problem. I'm stuck over here, but you know what? There is a solution. That solution has hope, and that hope has a name, and that name is Jesus Christ. And that's what your now wife found. That's what you found. And I love how God brought that family back and has grown it in such beautiful and life transforming ways. Told you I was crying.
incredible. Incredible, brother.
Oh, yes, I cry. I cry anyway, but it's a beautiful story because it's God's at work in real people, and it's the very contrast, isn't it, of what you thought church was, what religion was, what faith was, which is you go to church, you don't understand it, you go home again. What's the point in that?
Yeah.
And that was your encounter, I guess. But actually, it's a very real Jesus, and he really does care, and he actually wants to know you personally and walk with you through all the stuff you have to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. He cares about every little part of you. You know, I mean, even with my dad walking out, I had to forgive him. I had to then realize, stuff in me that had been dysfunctional because I was looking for this acceptance, but God was saying, you are accepted. I love you. That us unstitching some of that stuff. I mean, now I can honestly say that I am free indeed, Andy.
Amen.
And what's happened with me and my wife now is that not only is he restoring this generation, but he's restoring the next generation. So yeah, I mean, life could have been very, very different for my children. If we would have, I heard a very wise person say to me once, you are free to choose, but you are not free from the consequences of your choices. And so if Kelkina would have chosen that moment to do what she said that she was doing, my wife, if I continue in the life that I was living, it would have been very, very different for our children. But praise God, we are now free indeed.
Amen to that. I'm hoping that anybody who's listening to that who's stuck in a cycle of, well, I'm stuck. This is what I do. This is how I survive. Is hearing your story and saying, do you know what? There actually is a way through, whether it's through you or the experience of your wife. But what a beautiful thing that she opens the curtains and there's a van out. So I love how God places things seemingly completely innocuous, irrelevant, random, but they're really, really not. She opens the curtains and then it's like God speaking to her. You know the film Bruce Almighty? God showed me a sign, and he's driving along and there's a truck in front of him with all these signs. He's like, well, show me a sign, God. It's all stop, go back, turn around. But God does that, but we ignore it because we don't really want, it's like the good consequences as well. As there's a good consequence of,
Yeah.
well, if I do that, I can't do some of the things that I actually do find quite fun. And even though
Yeah.
we know they're not good for us and God's got something better, yeah, but I like this bit over here too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's move on to what you're doing now, because that's that's quite a history of stuff that you've been through. You're now working with people who are, I guess, where you were one step away from. Your brother took you in, so
Yeah.
you were one step away from being exactly in the place that some of the people are that you're working with. So how does it work with the organisation that you've got? You say you're not kind of, in some ways, you're not doing some of the things you might assume working with homeless guys and girls, but how do you actually find somebody, person A, and then work with them? What's the process that actually takes place there?
Yeah. So people, they will be referred to us. We've got a great catalogue of people that we work with, other services, CGL, Change, Grow, Live, NHS Mental Health, Manchester City Council, Wigan, the Message Trust refer people, Manchester City Mission, or you can actually do a self-referral. So, if you are in danger, so when I went to my brother's, if I didn't have my brother there at the time, yes, you're right, Andy. I was well in danger of becoming homeless, if I didn't have a family member to take me in. Was I homeless? Yeah, really, I was. Because I didn't have a secure place that I could call my home. I'm living with somebody now, and you've got to live by the rules. Can I do this? Can I do that? So yeah, I haven't got a place that I could call my home. So somebody like me back in the day, of course, we'd take you in if you filled in a referral form. We would do an interview process just to ensure that, if it's because some people might need rehabilitation, Andy. If they need rehabilitation, we are connected to other services that are willing to take people in. This has to be for you've pardon the expression, that person has to unfortunately fit a certain criteria. Would we take somebody in that's been recreational using? Yeah, we would, because we would then link them into, drug counsel as well. But if somebody is, pardon the expression, entrenched in their drug use, like heroin or something more serious, we would refer them to another service.
But it's only right and good that we are focused on what we are trying to do. We can't help everybody, and otherwise we're spread so thin, we end up being effectively ineffective. So I think
Yeah.
it's only right that we do focus. And I guess you would love to help everybody, but there's only so many hours in a day, and the process of helping somebody walk out of homelessness,
Yeah.
you need to walk with them quite intensively, I would imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the moment, we support vulnerable male adults at the moment. We're looking to open the door for women this year. We're waiting for Manchester City Council to come back to us whether or not that's feasible or not. We've got all the things in place because we get referrals for women as well. Women that are fleeing domestic violence, or just women that are becoming homeless for whatever reasons. So we just think that it's good and right that not only do we serve the men, but we serve the women as well. Once we get to a place where we're able to serve these people properly, I would like to then start looking at rehabilitation, because it's our heart and desire to be able to meet somebody at their point of need, irrespective of the trauma, drug use, background, sex, age. I want this to run like a well-oiled machine, but that we can open the door for anybody of whatever stage of homeless they're at.
So what is it you're actually doing with people then? So the guys are coming along, they've had the referral in from wherever that's coming from. What are they going to expect when they walk through the door with you for the first time? And what actually happens for them?
Right. So when they come to us, at the moment we have 4 properties. We're about to open another house in Wigan. So we have 3 properties in Wythenshawe. We have another property in Atherton. 3 of the properties are 4 bedroomed. We have one 2 bedroomed, and we're about to open another 4 bedroomed in Wigan. So when someone is referred to us, we would have a look at the dynamics of the house, what stage they're at. Are they quite a strong character? Are they just experiencing homelessness in a sense where they've come out of a broken down relationship, or have they been homeless for quite a long period of time, so they've got no stability in their lives? So we would then look at the houses and think, well, if we was to put this guy in house A, he would have some great peers around him to be able to fetch him on. We would then fashion a support plan that is fashioned to that person, tailored to that person's needs. So, we would have a look at mental health state. Have they been employed in the past? Is there any other services working with them? And then start to work with that person to bring them through any of the issues that they are being challenged with in their life. That being, we would then start to have a look at other services, see if there's, mental health that we can get involved. We have an outside counsellor that is able to work with our guys. We bridge the gap between other services like the Message Trust with other employment as well. Is part-time work? Are they ready for part-time working? And just really start to fetch this person on as well. But what we do at Homes of Hope is we have created like a family community. We don't just start putting you to work and saying you must, you must, you must. If that person falls, we will say, come on. But what we do want, Andy, is though that people genuinely want to change. I think it starts with us. We always say at Homes of Hope, if you are ready to grab the support, grab the stuff that's readily available for you, it works. And we're seeing great outcomes. People passing driving tests, people moving on to independent living, people working full time and starting to pay us rent. So they're now getting ready to go into the real world and tackle things. We want to stand with that person, but see you flourish. So empowering the person to do life for themselves.
It's fabulous that you can do that in a slow way, and I love the way you have to watch YouTube. You were smiling as you were saying that about the family stuff, because that's probably the one thing that has been sort of forced upon them, that there is a family on the street. We can understand that, but
Yeah.
it's not a very real family as much as it might feel like it, because people are going to be coming and going, and it's that instability again. But if you've got a house, four walls, people coming and going, support, all of a sudden it gets easier because you're seeing the same people every day. And if you put the toothpaste all over the sink, someone's going to make a point about that. That
Yeah.
isn't necessarily going to be the case if you're out on the street, because maybe people don't care. But it is that stability which is a part of that. But I love what you said also, that you get them to start paying rent, because this is one of the things that frustrated me, is that we throw help at people, and I think this is maybe a public body kind of solution. We'll throw people some money. Okay, you got to do this, you got to do that. What we don't do is walk with them to understand why that needs to happen. And well, how do you pay your rent? Well, it doesn't just happen. You have to actually keep the money to one side, and you have to know how to budget and how to cook. And if you haven't got money, you need to, it's all that stuff which we take for granted when we're in a house and a job and all that kind of stuff. But you actually need to learn that again.
Yeah, of course you do. And we will start with that person, even if it's basic needs. And we've got a great team of support workers and volunteers as well that will just come and cook with the guys, that will budget with the guys. We've got a minibus. We took the guys bowling a few months ago. We're planning to go for a nice walk for Stay of Spring, and just, we're a family. We want you to feel like you're included in this as well.
Mm.
And no matter what your problems are, we just want you to be transparent with us. If you say, Ryan, I've really failed this weekend. I've gone out. I've made a right mess of things. I've gone back to my old ways. We can work with that. It's when people start to hide it away, and we try to deceive, but more than anything, they start to deceive themselves again. you know. We're planning this year to go away to Encounter Camp, which is in Evesham. So we just take the guys camping. Come on, let's go and camp. Let's go on an adventure. We want Homes of Hope to be an experience that even if you walk out of Homes of Hope tomorrow, you will look back and say, these guys are the ones that made me feel included. These guys are the ones where I actually felt like I didn't feel invisible anymore. I felt like it counted. And we've in the past, if somebody has walked out, or, they have just, it's not been the right help for them at the time, we've taken people back, when they are ready for the help. Like you said, you can't really throw or force help on somebody. You've got to want to change yourself. So, yeah.
But that's exactly what you said about your now wife and you, is that your wife had to get to a place of severe depression. Not it was good, but that was the point in which she said, I can't do this. I need help. Reached out for God.
Yes.
You got to a place of saying, my kids are now looking at me and I'm not being what I need to be for them. So that kind of created this momentum, this catalyst for changing your own heart. I want to do something different. And that is so critical, because then you are trying to change rather than people trying to force you to change. And we all know it doesn't work, doesn't it? Calm down. Has that ever in the history of humanity worked to help someone calm down? We're trying to modify their behavior. What we need to do is for them to think, I need to calm down. Everything's different. But I mean, a bit of a silly example, but it's the point of what you're trying to do is to get these guys to realize, I want to change and this is how I can change, and then giving them what they need. Is there kind of a length of time that it takes from a guy, not like, is it 12-week program? I don't mean that, but is there like a time that they come? Is there like an average time when you see this is how long it takes to get somebody's life back on track?
So we say that we're 18 months to 2 years, Andy, but it's like we had a guy that was 28 months in the project, and it was like because there's such a housing crisis at the moment, and especially for single men, trying to get them into independent living, we're probably looking at best maybe a HMO, and even that, they want a few months rent up front, they want a massive deposit, but by the power of prayer, brother. Yeah. We somehow managed to see these guys go on to independent living. That's the longest that we've had somebody with us. But, so it was 28 months in, and we was look with if we're seeing progression with a person, as long as we're seeing progression, we will continue to walk with that person as long as it takes. Um, if there's digression, depending on the circumstance, it's, we'll stand with that person until we can't,
Yeah.
Andy. And I think that's the difference. We don't want to be a service that says, "Oh, you failed the system. Sorry."
Mm.
We want to be a service that says, we'll stand with you no matter what. We understand. Going through addiction myself, I know that how topsy turvy that can be.
Mm.
Almost experiencing homelessness in the common sense of where I could have been on the streets if I didn't have a family member. I understand the complexities around that. So yeah, we want to be a service that makes a difference.
If you're going to give somebody some confidence, it takes quite a lot of time for them to have confidence in you, for you to be able to put confidence back into them. It's never going to be a quick fix, is it?
No, no, no. And, I think most of our guests have been let down by family, the world, the services that are out there. They've been let down by, friends. They've tried everything. You talked about a God-shaped hole where we seem to be all searching for something that nothing fulfills. Even when I was an asbestos manager, I was earning like up to a grand a week. And then I was thinking to myself, right, well, what's next? Maybe I could earn £1,500 a week. There was always this wanting more. We're never satisfied. If I used to drive a nice BMW, but I was thinking to myself, what's next? You know, um, yeah, but with God, once you know who you are in Christ, it's like even if you took everything away from me now, Andy, I'm reminded of what Paul the Apostle says. He says, whether I'm above or a base, I'm always happy with God. You're satisfied.
Mm.
And I suppose, for these guys, they've never had any sort of satisfaction. And just that if they can be accepted, putting the basics into people, showing them some love, showing that, be where there's unity, where there's counsel, the people rise. Where there's no counsel, the people fall. Giving them good counsel, pointing people in the right direction. Just small little principles, brother.
Fabulous stuff. Gonna have to bring this to a close. How do people get hold of you? I'm guessing there's a website for what you're doing. I'm guessing you're up for support and prayer. So how do people access and help?
Yeah, so we have just recently we have done a promotional video. It's a pound appeal video, which is on our website. So if you go over to www.homesofhope.co.uk, you can sign up to our newsletter on there. There's actually an info email address on there if you want to just send me an email and I'll get back to you. If you want to donate, the pound appeal is on there. So we're just asking people for £1 to transform the lives of these people that we're helping. So if you feel like you can't physically be involved, but you want to put maybe a seed in there, then, we're just asking for a small token. That's actually on the website as well. If you go to the website, you'll see a pound appeal. You click on the pound appeal, it'll take you straight to the Just Give. So yeah, that's www.homesofhope.co.uk.
Ryan, thank you. It's been a pleasure finding out about some of your journey, and I love hearing how God takes who we are And when we say, okay, Lord, over to you, Jesus, take my life and let it be. When we do that, it's amazing and beautiful how he's taken all the stuff that you've done, all the bad stuff, and it's so useful and redeemed now because you're using it every day, which is beautiful. So, homesofhope.co.uk, Ryan, thank you kindly.
Thank you so much, Andy. God bless.
Pure Media, the magazine, is hand perfected with some of the finest writers from around the world that we could find, and yes, Andy B too. New editions are released just for you on the first Friday of every month, from our family to your family. Pure Media, the magazine, is available now. Sign up for free at puremediafamily.com/magazine.